chance to speak, if no one prays, these very stones cry out, I am.
Shalom. Hello again. Well, this evening, Petra, a world-renowned tourist location, and could have been a biblical location. We're going to show you from the scriptures why it isn't really a biblical location. We have Dr. Thomas McCall, who is the consulting theologian with our ministry and who went out there and looked at it.
It's great to be with you, Zola, and this has been a wonderful series, and Petra was something to see.
Yeah, that's one of the great sites, and it is an old one. As far as the land where it's located, Edom, Esau in Genesis 36, and I'm going back about 4,000 years here, thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom, it says, and then it gives his generations and so on. Edom really means red. It's Adam's name.
Right, and Esau and Adam and Edom all mean red in one way or another.
Esau was red-haired.
Yes, and he was red-haired, and he settled in the red land as the red-haired man, and that became his home.
Interesting. Now Moses is going to encounter these Edomites later on, the descendants of Esau, and it's not going to be friendly. A little like in the Middle East today. It says Moses, this is in the Exodus, Moses sent messengers from Kadesh unto the king of Edom. Thus saith thy brother Israel, he says, thou knowest all the travails that hath befallen us. He tells them about, gosh, they've been in the slavery and in the Exodus. They need to pass through his country. They're willing to pay for it. He says, we'll go by the highway, and if I and my cattle drink of thy water, then I will pay for it. I will, without doing anything else, go through on my feet. He says, I'm not going to steal anything or change the land in any way. And the king says, thou shalt not go through. And Edom came out against him with much people and a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his border, wherefore Israel turned away from him. And for that reason, it's not a biblical site.
And from time immemorial, even today, there are two highways through Edom. There's the King's Highway, and that's what Moses wanted to take. That was the shortcut to get to the River Jordan and where they were going to go. And when the Edomites said, no, you're not going to come through here, they had to turn and go along the Desert Highway. And that was the long route, and it was a lot of trouble for the people of Israel.
Yeah. Well, Obadiah finally prophesied the destruction of Edom later on, and the Nabataeans took over. They were the great city builders. They took over in about the 6th century BC with their superior water cisterns and their excellent cities, including Petra. Petra may be mentioned in the book of 2 Kings as Selah. Here in the rugged mountains of Seir lies the city of Petra. Located adjacent to a major ancient trade route, Petra hosted caravans from Mesopotamia, Persia, India, and China. The Nabataeans, extracting taxes from the merchants delivering spices, precious stones, and rich fabrics, developed Petra into a wealthy metropolis. A winding gorge is the only entrance to the city because of the mountainous surroundings. This road between the rising brown sandstone hills leads to the entrance of the ravine. A magnificent burial chamber called the Obelisk tomb is located along the way. Believed to have been created in the 1st century BC, the lower part is a burial tomb. The 4 large obelisks above are thought to represent Nabataean gods.
Well, you can really see the colors here now.
Our guide, ABED, joined Dr. McCall inside the narrow canyon that leads to the city of Petra.
We've been in this magnificent gorge here, walking down for several minutes. ABED, how much further is it that we have to go?
Oh, well, we still have actually about 20 minutes to go because we have just started, like you see, and we have like 3,600 feet, the length of this gorge here. So we still have to at least 20 minutes. Yeah.
Well, how high is this gorge?
Well, actually, this is, it's different from one point to another, but it's in between 100, 200 feet to 300 feet, actually.
What do they call this magnificent gorge that we're looking at?
We call it in Arabic today, we call it Sikh, but originally Sikh, it's not an Arabic word, it's an old language. We still use it today to call the Seek of Petra, or the entrance of Petra, which is the only main way, the only passageway to go in and out of Petra. We call it the Seek. And if you notice here, we have this channel of water, okay? And this was carved too by the Nabataeans.
That's the cut into the rock here.
The cut into the rock, right. This is to collect the rainwater from the top of the mountains and send it all the way down to the city of Petra.
Running along the opposite side of the Seek, we see the broken remains of another ancient water system. This reddish clay water pipe was used by the Nabataeans to transport drinking water from a nearby spring to the city. The Nabataeans collected the water in a large cistern inside the city and distributed it throughout Petra. In addition to the watercourses, religious symbols were carved into the cavern walls as well.
I see the niche over here and these stones built up in a kind of a level thing. What do these mean, Abed?
Well, actually, if you notice now, going down, each time you see something like this, you see a niche in the front of it. And if you look at the niche over there, you see a piece of stone. And like I told you, the Nabataeans did not, at the beginning, did not represent the shape of their god. They used to represent it with a figure, with a stone, or with an obelisk, actually. And this is an idol inside one of the niches, because this Seek was not just the entrance and exit to the city, it was even for worshipping. And this actually was an altar inside the Seek. Worshipping, they used to stop. They used to make many stops, okay, inside. And like this, you'll see 2 or 3 of them inside the Seek.
So the Seek itself was something of a temple where they would make offerings or worship from time to time at these different niches.
That's right. That's right.
Numerous niches line the walls of the Seek. One of the most prominent is this one, carved into a natural outcrop. 2 gods are represented in the form of rectangular blocks. The large one on the left is the god of the city of Petra. The smaller block is the city's goddess. Chiseled into the rock above the area was the high priest's quarters. This was a temporary residence used by the priest while overseeing sacrificial rituals. The actual offerings were made on this flat stone altar at the base of the statues. Much like these gods, the city of Petra has often lain silent in history. In fact, following the expulsion of the Crusaders from the region in the 12th century, Petra's location was a mystery to the Western world. In the 1800s, Swiss explorer Johann Burckhardt rediscovered the city. Knowing the Arabs were suspicious of strangers and infidels, Burckhardt disguised himself as a Muslim scholar. Word of his find spread, and Petra was once again on the map. Today, visitors come by the thousands to view the impressive carved facades of the city and the magnificent gorge that acts as its entrance. Minerals in the sandstone give the pass its rich colors. Iron, especially abundant, is responsible for the rich red hues. Like their predecessors, Arab entrepreneurs use horses and horse-drawn carriages to escort people to and from the city. Taking a break from his duties, this young boy enjoys a backward joyride through the kingdom. Regardless of the viewpoint, the sights are extraordinary. After walking for almost a mile, Tom and Abed spy their destination through a slit in the narrow canyon.
I believe we're coming to the part that, in the site that has thrilled the world. We've seen pictures of this.
Oh yeah, look. Have a look from this side.
Yes.
Okay, we're actually arriving. This is the beginning of the city of Petra, and we have just finished the entrance.
It is the most striking of all the monuments of Petra. Its massive Corinthian-style columns, cut from the sedimentary rock, reveal a Greek or Hellenistic influence. Although referred to as the Treasury, it most certainly was not. The confusion comes from an ancient myth that treasures from the Pharaoh of Egypt had been deposited here during the time of the Exodus. Some scholars theorize it was a royal tomb. A small cubicle inside is thought to have been the king's burial chamber. Other scholars conclude its facade is more in keeping with a temple, presuming the rear chamber was a sanctuary. Because of the lack of written records, dating the structure is equally difficult. Most likely it was created in the 1st century AD. Whether temple or tomb, it is certainly an awe-inspiring sight for all of those entering Petra. When we return, we'll reveal more of the wonders of the rose-red city and what part it may play in end times events.
Come with Zola Levitt and see for yourself the land of the covenant.
You know, Zola puts on one of the most spectacular trips you could ever be on. The whole group, everybody just puts everything together. It's spectacular.
With what was chosen for us to do, as well as who guided us, who spoke with us, the other people on the trip, it was wonderful.
Other people said they went on cruises and trips like this, and it was all historical, and they saw a lot of sights, but this was spiritual, and this was really good. So I'm really glad I picked Zola Levitt's group to tour the Holy Land.
Tour the Holy Land with Zola Levitt. Call or write for more information.
Well, our tourist groups visit Petra on our extended Israel tours, and it's some place to visit. There's peace now, or there's a peace treaty, Tom, between Jordan and Israel, but there hadn't always been good relations between Edom and Israel.
It goes back even from the time of Esau and Jacob. Then in the New Testament time, there was troubles between Herod Antipas, the king, the tetrarch in Galilee and Perea, and the king of the Nabataeans there in the Petra area named Aretas. Now, this really isn't brought out in the scriptures, the Aretas side of it, but it's an interesting story because King Herod married Aretas's daughter, and that was his first wife.
Well, that should start good relations.
Oh, yes, it should, but it didn't, because he got tired of Aretas's daughter, and he wanted to marry Philip's wife, Herodias. Well, they cooked up a scheme between them, Herod and Herodias, and when he got back from Rome, he was going to handle things. Well, the daughter of Aretas got wind of this, according to Josephus. This all comes out in his writings. She got wind of this shift, and so she got away from King Herod and got down to Machaerus over there in Perea, and then got to her dad there in Edom, perhaps in Petra, where he was ruling. And then, of course, King Herod married Herodias, and you have this big story about John the Baptist criticizing that and him being beheaded.
Oh, yes. Well, it does tie into the New Testament. Well, Petra ties into prophecy, too. We're going to talk more about that later. But first, more looks at this very fascinating city.
This is such a spectacular civilization we see all around us, Abed.
Well, actually, we're dealing with the Nabataeans here, who had come originally from Yemen around the 6th century BC.
That's on the other side of Saudi Arabia.
That's right. They had to cross all Saudi Arabia and come and settle here. I don't mean Petra, I mean the southern area of Jordan. And that was in the 6th century BC, and they were still Bedouins at the time.
When did they begin to actually live here in Petra?
Settling here by chance, they realized that this area was a very important in the field of commerce. All the caravans used to pass through here, so they started to let people pay taxes.
This was a commercial center then?
That's it.
Was there a caravan route or something like that?
It is on the caravan route, which connects Asia with Africa, down south, and from north you could come even from Europe, passing through here, from the east to the west. But when the Nabataeans settled here, they thought about making a city, getting wealthy, making money. They thought about making a station here. making a city, a very well-protected city.
An international trade center for the caravan route.
That's right. And they started to expand all over around this area, and this became the most important city in their kingdom.
Well, it seems so well protected here, coming in through the gorge, the Seek, and then surrounded by the mountains. Were the people ever attacked here and conquered by outside people?
Many people had tried to attack them, like the Greeks around 300 BC, but they failed in attacking them. They did not succeed because the entrance, it's very easy to be protected. The Romans, they had tried many times until they got tired, and then they had decided to make sanctions against the Nabataeans, and that's how they took over the city, peacefully with no fighting.
You used sanctions even back then?
We had sanctions even back then.
And so there was some kind of an agreement made between the Nabataeans and the Romans for trade?
Yes, sure. Well, the most important reason why the Romans wanted to take over here because they didn't want to pay that much taxes passing through here. So that's why they made the sanctions, and that's why they had built the 10 cities of the Decapolis, and the caravans used to pass through those cities and do not pass through the city of Petra. The city of Petra started to decline economically, and that's how they made such an agreement, and they told the Romans to come in peacefully with no fighting, and the city started to become Roman Nabataean city. And this was not the end of the Nabataeans actually, it was a new start of the Nabataeans. And 324, it was in the field of religion, it was starting to become a very important Christian city.
The beginning of the Byzantine period.
That's right.
Eventually though, it sort of disappeared from history and people forgot about Petra. How did it get lost to history and then rediscovered?
Losing its importance, its economical importance, people started to leave this city to go look for jobs somewhere else. And then with the time, with the arrival of Muslims in 634 in this area, it had lost completely its importance and people started to leave. And it kept losing its importance with the time till the end of the 18th century. In 1812, when the Swiss guy, Burckhardt, had decided to come and see, because he had read about it in the old writings of Strabo, the Sicilian guy, and Josephus Flavius, who had written about the Jewish monument. Those had written about Petra, they had mentioned Petra in their writings, and that's why he was insisting to come and see inside Petra. And in 1812, he was the first one to rediscover the city of Petra for the West, actually, not for us here, because here we knew about the existence of Petra, and we had those local people who live here now, who live around here now, those used to live inside Petra till 1983.
And so the West learned about it and started coming to visit Petra, and now you have an average of 2,000 tourists a day coming through this.
This is right. We started having tourists since already the 50s and the 40s, and even in the 19th century we had some individuals who used to come. At the beginning of this century already groups used to come to Petra, and now we have an average of 2,000 people a day come to Petra.
Well, we're in a sort of a bowl-like area here where it opens up, and I see over here the wall, the cliff there, and there's holes in it. It looks like there are caves there. What do those signify?
Those cliffs are popular tombs.
For the people, not royal tombs?
No, just popular tombs for the people, for the normal people.
Tombs of numerous shapes and sizes overwhelm the cliffs of Petra. These four massive tombs define much of what is considered Nabataean design. Pairs of pilasters carved along the sides of the tombs are crowned with the simple horned capital, which was distinctly Nabataean. Carved into the side of yet another mountain are the royal tombs. The first and most imposing is this one. Known as the urn tomb, it gets its name from a small urn on the peak of the memorial. The vaults below were constructed to support the terrace in front of the grave. Greek writing found inside the monument reveals that Christians used the site as a church in the mid-5th century. The inscription reads, "In the time of the most holy Bishop Jason, this place was dedicated to Christ the Savior. After hundreds of years of worshiping stone idols, many here turned to the one true God. With so much space devoted to tombs and temples, we wondered where the people lived.
So actually the people did not live in caves like this. Some of them they did in carving houses, very few of them, but most of them they lived in built houses.
And they built it of what kind of material?
Stone.
Mostly stone.
I mean, they have
all around in this valley area.
Yeah, they had stone everywhere in this area, and they used the stone in building up, and most of those houses now being destroyed.
Back behind you there, it looks like something like a theater.
Yeah, actually in the Nabataean culture, we do not have a theater. We have it in the Roman and the Greek culture. And this was some kind of a sacrifice place.
Pagan altar or, that they would use to sacrifice to their deities.
That's right. After the Romans had arrived and they had come to the city, it had the shape, this sacrifice place had the shape of theater. They had continued and they made of it a theater, and the Nabataeans had made their sacrifice place on the top of this mountain. You climb up using these steps. Those are 600 steps to go all the way up to the top of that mountain where the sacrifice altar we have.
You can actually climb up to the top.
Oh yes, to the top of this mountain, to the top of this mountain, and to the top of all these mountains around here. And by the way, Petra, it's not just the low part which we are visiting right now. Petra expands about 40 square kilometers. To visit Petra, all of it, you need more than 2 weeks to climb all these mountains and behind the mountains.
Well, thank you very much, Abed, for explaining Petra to us.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
Well, one of the themes of the tribulation period is the Antichrist blasphemy in the temple. And Tom, it says, you know, when you see that abomination of desolation, the Lord warned Israel, then flee into the hills of Judea, into the wilderness. And people have associated Petra with this fleeing, especially because of Revelation 12:6. And the woman, Israel in Revelation, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,203 score days, 1,260 days, which is a half tribulation period. So when he blasphemes in the middle of it, they have that much time left.
And the woman is obviously Israel. She is the one who brought forth the man-child who will rule the world with a rod of iron, as the passage says. Yeah. But the Antichrist hates the woman, Israel, and wants to persecute Israel out of existence. And so God has a way of escape for Israel during the tribulation, and has a place prepared for the fleeing Israelites during the tribulation in the wilderness.
But why do they say Petra?
Well, and that's the question, because where in the wilderness is this? And we don't know for sure. But there are suggestions in other passages in the Bible, particularly in Isaiah, that speak of a place in Edom or in Bozrah where the Lord is going to make his appearance in the second coming.
Now that passage is Isaiah 63:1. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah, that this is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength? It sounds like the Messiah.
Isaiah asks, who is this? And I think you're right. I believe it is the Messiah. It's a great messianic prophecy. But the strange thing is, it speaks of the Messiah coming from the south, from Edom and from Bozrah, and that section across Jordan. What is the Messiah doing down there, and why are his garments dyed with red, bloody, and so forth? And we usually think in terms of Christ returning in Armageddon, in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, and areas like that. But here, Isaiah speaks of him coming out of Edom and Bozrah. What's he doing down there? So many have suggested that that is the place that the Lord has prepared for Israel in the tribulation, and that they will flee there when Satan and the Antichrist are going after them in such a vicious way during the tribulation.
Yeah.
And that when he comes, he will rescue them out of that situation.
The theologian W.E. Blackstone was totally convinced of that.
He was a great theologian around the turn of the century, last century, and he probably helped more Christians become premillennialists and believe in the future of Israel and the rapture of the church and all those wonderful teachings than any one person back at that time. Well, he so believed this, Zola, that he thought that Petra was the place where the Jewish people were going to be hiding during the time of the tribulation, that he packed up thousands of Hebrew New Testaments and carried them over to Petra and hid them in those great caves and monuments and statues and temples and so forth all over Petra, so that the Jewish people would have them during the time of the tribulation.
What a wonderful mission. And I've heard people are carrying on this particular mission.
Yes, and people have looked for these and haven't been able to find them. He must have hid them very good, or we don't know what's happened to those New Testaments, but they may be there at the appointed time for their appointed purpose.
Fascinating. Thanks very much, Tom. Appreciate your participation. All right, watch next week. We'll have the crucified man, the only existing evidence of crucifixion. We'll have it on our program, so be sure to see next week's program. The Levitt Letter has articles about Israel and prophecy and more than we can give you in a half-an-hour television program. And Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.